the Jewish people, and I think one of the things was the right to own a gun.
Yeah.
What was the first one that you said?
Well, he took away their right to anonymity. They had to wear
Oh, that's right. That's what it was. Okay.
that
The Judah patch, yeah.
the Star of David.
Yeah.
And what that made it possible to do was to identify them quickly and then begin the rounding up.
Is that like being like what prisoners have, where they have their numbers
Yeah.
to their outfits?
Yeah, or where they give them orange jumpsuits, or
Right.
in the old days it was, black and white striped jumpsuits. And part of that is that even if you escape, until you can get some other clothes, which might not be easy, you are easily identifiable.
Is that why they made it orange now?
Yeah.
And Paul was right in what he said, because they did tattoo the number.
Oh, they did. They certainly did. Yeah.
If we wait long enough, soon it'll be like red and blue for like Republican and Democrat, so they can
Yes.
figure out who's what.
Which jail to put you in.
Yeah, they'll spray paint you.
Uh, The history, and I know there's a lot of people that are anti-guns, that you don't have to be for guns, but every society that has taken away guns from its own people has ended in mass murder. And in the 20th century alone, and it's carried into this 21st century, over 100 million people were murdered by their own government. It is one thing to say, oh, there was a war and, 50 million people were killed in World War II, but it's one thing to, in the middle of war, have a situation where people on both sides are killing indiscriminately.
I was watching a movie called Knight Rider 2000, and in that movie, they outlaw guns. No one's allowed to have guns. The problem is the only people that have guns are the police and all the bad guys.
Yeah.
So all the bad guys have the guns, and the police have the guns, so everyone else is in trouble because.
Yep. Well,
did you say 120 million?
100 million.
100 million by their own government
By
in
their
the
own
last
government.
century.
In the 20th century, 100 million. And of course, the biggest culprits of that were two ideologies. And one of those two was by far the largest, communism. So under communism, you have Castro, which was a minor player, that murdered several million in Cuba. You have Pol Pot, who murdered 6 million in Cambodia. Then you get to the big boys. Stalin, who murdered as many as 30 to 50 million, and nobody can determine how many. And the king of all of them, which was Mao Zedong, who was over 50 million. And of course, the other actor in that was, who is not communist, Hitler. And as the meme says, I don't know if you've seen this meme that shows, Nazi soldiers putting guns to people's head with the cattle cars in the background. The only reason people take away guns is you don't get into cattle cars if you have a gun. Had the Jews had guns, they wouldn't have been put in cattle cars. They may have been killed, but they'd have gone down defending themselves. They wouldn't have meekly gotten into cattle cars to be shuffled off to death camps. Same with the Soviets. So, we have to understand what's the difference philosophically as Christians. Let's bring this back to Christian theology. What is the difference between capitalism and communism from a Christian perspective?
Well, from a Christian perspective, communism works because we're all good people. Or you mean in the sinful world, or versus?
From a Christian worldview,
Capitalism is the lesser of the two evils.
Why?
Because
I didn't hear what Mike said. Can you say it again?
Government is God.
Well, that's true, but here is the fundamental, and Paul's got it. Here's the fundamental flaw in communism. In an ideal world, is communism good?
Yes.
Yes. Everyone gets what they need. Everybody provides as much as they want. If we didn't have sin, that would be an idealized world. What's the problem with it? We do have sin, and therefore it never works. Capitalism was built by people who had a Christian worldview, who recognized the sinfulness of human beings. And at the fundamental level of capitalism, it says people are selfish and will be most motivated by what benefits them. So build a system that motivates sinful people.
Read.
Greed. Or if you don't want to be that crass, because for many people it's not greed, but self-interest. It's in my best interest to have a job and make money. If I get the same amount of stuff, no matter what I do, what do most sinful people do?
Nothing.
Nothing. So we need to understand that it's not enough to say, well, this is Christian. And I've seen Christians try to defend communism as being the biblical model. Where do they go? I just heard somebody the other day do this.
Acts.
Acts, the
They-
early
they
chapters
sold
of
all
Acts.
their
They
goods.
sold all their goods and they.
Common.
What is happening in the book of Acts? Why is it that they were doing that?
Convictions.
No.
Building a kingdom.
Who were the people who were selling their goods and distributing those goods? What is the situation that required that in the early chapters of Acts?
People were starving and needed help.
Why? This is important.
Persecution.
No. Who were those people?
They're the ones that were all from out of town.
Yes. Who were the people that got saved on the day of Pentecost?
The visitors to town.
People who had come from all over the world to come to Jerusalem for what?
Holy days.
Pentecost. Jewish holiday, not a Christian holiday. So what had been their expectation when they came to Jerusalem?
That they were going to turn
There'd
around and
be
go home.
supplies.
Yeah, they were going to be there a week, maybe two, and then they were going to head home. They were there on pilgrimage. So now what happens on the day of Pentecost?
Lives were changed.
They get saved. But what's the difficulty?
They needed to stay.
They're from out of town. They're from Cappadocia and Achaia, all those places, Pontus, places way out there.
Hear the gospel. They need to hear the word.
They need to be trained in the gospel. Have they heard Jesus speak?
No.
No. Are they familiar with Jesus' teachings? Do they know the parables that he taught in the hillsides of Galilee? No. There's no television with Jesus going on in the air and giving interviews that are broadcast around the world.
They don't even know what he looked like, right?
No, they don't know anything about him. So what is their crying need?
Need to be taught.
They need to be taught. They need to be discipled. Why? They're going to go back to their home areas eventually. And what are they going to do when they go there?
Share.
They're going to found churches in their home areas. Now, again, they may very well be there, but did their entire families come? Well, some of them might have if they were rich. Some of them, their Their families may be back home, getting by without them. And as they're there, they're gonna need at least months and maybe a year or two of training before they can go back and found strong churches that they're gonna be the leadership of. How long did they plan to be there?
Few days.
Yeah, a few days, maybe a few weeks. Now they're gonna have to plan to be there months.
They're gonna need food.
Can they go to an ATM and draw on their local bank account back in Cappadocia?
Of course.
Do they have a Visa card that they can pull out and pay for those extended stays?
No.
So what very, very quickly happens?
People start supplying their needs.
People start running out of money. They're having to find accommodations. They're having to find food. Maybe they have to send money back to the family because they're not there to provide the work that's necessary to keep their things going. Where do they get this money? Well, there are some very rich Christians, new Christians who are there who say, hey, we need to get these guys trained. We'll sell our property and give so that everyone can stay in Jerusalem. Is there ever a time after that in the New Testament that Christians are told to sell all their property and give so that everybody has equality?
No.
No. Why? Because there's never again this kind of special need in this very limited environment.
Wasn't that all voluntary? And
Sure, absolutely.
whereas communism is not voluntary.
Oh, it's anything but. So this is what we need to understand today. That as I was talking Sunday about knowing the difference between the ways of God and just the deeds of God. For so long, the church has focused on Jesus did this, Moses did this, the stuff that was done. Well, that's the foundation. But then you have to build on that the principles. And the principle of capitalism agrees with Christianity at its heart. And that is people are sinful. And so you have to build. So what's the big complaint about wicked people today who have no Christian worldview and who are making all these comments? What's the big complaint about the government?
They're not giving me enough.
Yeah, it doesn't move quickly enough. There are obstructionists. They're slowing things down. We need to make radical changes and we need to make them now. So what's President Biden do?
Give them more.
95% of all the laws that have been passed in the last 3 years, how are they passed?
By
Executive
order.
Worse. Some of them by that. By administrative rulings. Unelected people in bureaucracies pass these huge amounts of regulations that there's no act of Congress authorizing.
Wasn't that what an executive order is when a president makes a?
But an executive order is the president does this. This is a bureaucracy, part of the executive branch, like the ATF or the EPA. Did anybody vote for the head of the EPA? Anybody vote for the head of the ATF? Anybody vote for the head of the FBI? But they make all these regulations that Congress never did anything about. Our godly forefathers said, because people are sinful, what should the government be? slow, ponderous. It should take a long time to do things because governments have a propensity to do things quickly and abuse power because that's what sinful people do.
Oh, it's like when I want to buy something at work, I have to go into the software, submit the thing I want, it has to go through like 10 approvals before it's actually ordered.
And so all of those statements about, it just takes too long to do things. We need the president to just, or we need the bureaucrats to just. That's because they want to indulge these sinful human cravings. Our godly forefathers said, no. It's going to take a long time to get laws passed. Change the Constitution? Well, you better have 50 years. Because they recognize the fundamental sinfulness of humanity. And these modern people don't. And that's why we have all the problems that we have.
Now, would you say it's also part of the society and that now, like if
Sure.
I want to go and watch something, I can just like immediately pull up the stream and watch it immediately, whereas I'd have to go to like Blockbuster after it's come out and get it. Now everything's so instant that now as a society, we have to have everything now.
Well, not everything. I just listened to a person, anybody here have Alexa?
Yeah, we do.
This person asked, and confirm it, because I would not have Alexa in my house, because you understand if you have that, they're listening to you every moment of the day.
She stops every once in a while and says,
Me and the
"Okay,
government are buddies.
I didn't get that."
We're on a
Yeah.
first name basis.
Yeah, and the forces that will become Antichrist's minions are listening. So take that for what it's worth. But I watched this person, they asked, tell me why I should vote for Trump.
And
Alexa,
it remained silent.
it answered. And here's what it answered. That is a partisan question. I am not allowed to answer partisan questions. You'll have to answer that yourself. Then they turned around and said, why should I vote for Kamala Harris?
Speech.
Oh, let me tell you the reasons that you should. And went on for, like Nick says, a 5-minute speech.
Double standard.
So again, it is not that we have everything at our fingertips. What do we have at our fingertips? What can we instantly get access to? What they want us
Here.
to get access to. What will impact our thinking? They are pulling the Reagan movie off out of theaters. Did anybody hear that?
No.
Do you know why?
But don't they start pulling most movies out of theaters? Like there's some.
It what might have an effect on the election and cause people to have a favorable view of one of the political parties. So therefore, we have to pull that from the theaters for the next till after the election. The Vance movie that was done by, who did that? Anybody know? I don't watch this stuff anymore. Was it Netflix that did the movie about his life?
I don't know.
I know Disney has done it a couple times. They'll like buy TV shows and then store it in, like they did it with some of the Punisher stuff.
They're pulling, yeah, they're pulling that as well for the same reason.
Yep.
We don't want anyone to have a favorable opinion that might impact their voting.
Okay, so
Can we start pulling all the commercials?
All these political commercials.
All they do is bash each other.
Axe supports communism. what supports capitalism?
This very principle of sin, of the sinfulness of humanity,
I think it's Matthew 25:29.
which is,
For whoever has, more will be given, and whoever has not, what little they have will be taken away.
probably that's not the context that he means it, but you can apply it with that.
Well, there's also the one where if you have a,
If any man will not, this is the more direct one.
Because I was arguing with a socialist while working for a company that referred to itself as a Christian company. I was arguing with a socialist and he just looked at me and it's like the wind was taken out of his sails.
First Timothy 5:8. What's that say? No,
no, that's in Exodus, isn't it?
No,
No.
he's still talking about Timothy. He who does not work should not eat.
Oh, I was thinking of
no,
the.
that's not in Timothy. What's Timothy?
That's Thessalonians.
And
But if anyone's not provide his own, for his own, and especially for those in his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever.
who is responsible for caring for your family? The government?
No.
You are. It is your responsibility. Welfare for single mothers, not biblical. Not at all biblical. To provide for your family is your responsibility, no one else's.
Okay, this is the one I was thinking of.
Yeah.
Exodus, 10, Exodus 10:11. But during the 7th year, let the land lie unplowed and unused, and the
That's the
poor
year of
among your
Jubilee.
people may get.
Actually, that's the Sabbath year. Jubilee was the
But
50th.
you're right, it's Second Thessalonians 3:10.
Second Thessalonians 3:10.
Don't
is
work,
the other
don't
one.
eat.
Oh, yeah, so that's what I'm saying is that, yeah, you have to work, and then for the people who can't work, don't take all the food, but leave so that they can get their own food. Like, don't even supply it for them, but allow them to be able to work.
Well, that was different than the Sabbath year. That was different than the Sabbath year. The Sabbath year was
Leading thing.
And that was
the
rounding off-
law of gleaning in the Old Testament was what?
Rounding off the field. Like
That you left 10% of the field unharvested. Now,
That's
which
what they-
10? Go ahead.
Ruth benefited from that, because they
Yeah.
didn't have a lot of.
Yep, Ruth was a beneficiary of that. What 10% did you leave unharvested?
corners.
Yeah, the hardest part to get to. You didn't give the best to them. You took the best because it's your property. But you left the last 10%. And if someone didn't have something, you gathered it up, you milled it into bread, and you gave them the bread, right?
Nope, they had to work.
If you've ever you've been on a farm, if you run a harvester, it only makes sense, you can't make it to the corners.
Yeah. They didn't have harvesters, but yes.
Well, they had a horse that was pulling something and you can't make it to the corners.
They were to leave that 10%. And the people who were in need had to personally go. And they had to harvest it, they had to gather it, they had to thrash it, they had to grind it, they had to do all of the work. So if anything, God is for what? Work fair. Do you remember that term that was no welfare, work fair? You need the opportunity to be able to work. But the outcome, that's entirely up to you. But 2 Thessalonians 3:10 is the big one in the New Testament, the other big one. You're to provide for your own household, 2 Timothy 5, 1 Timothy 5. Second of all, what's 3:10?
Even when we were with you, we gave you this rule, if a man will not work, he shall not eat.
Does that sound like if a man won't work, he should get welfare?
And that doesn't leave out getting help. It doesn't leave out a family member.
So
She doesn't have principles.
where's Louise? We used to talk about that a lot. Where is that verse
Wait, I'm sorry, which one, what was the question?
about people needing help?
God helps those? No, that's
No.
not a biblical.
God
word.
helps those who help
Uh,
themselves.
Yeah, that's in the third Hezekiah
Yeah.
9:1.
First Louise.
It's if you don't, you have to ask for help. If you,
But where is it about the need to help people who need help? That was something opening on my phone.
A little like.
that you have, that you can help them help them with their burdens, but they have to carry their.
Ah, there's two things. There are two. Galatians chapter 6. Now there are two things here. Notice what they are, and we need to distinguish between those things very, very carefully. See, these are the principles that we need to learn about Scripture, not just, well, so-and-so did this, or this verse says that. What does it mean? Start at the beginning of Galatians chapter 6. Somebody want to read?
Brothers and sisters, if someone is caught in a sin, you who live by the Spirit should restore that person gently. But watch yourselves, or you may also be tempted. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. If anyone thinks they are something when they are not, they deceive themselves. Each one should test their own actions. Then they can take pride in themselves alone, without comparing themselves with someone else. For each one should carry their own load.
And you can
Nevertheless,
stop right there.
Yeah.
So there are two things talked about and contrasted in this 4 verses, if you start at 2. Verses 2 to 5. What are the two things that are
The
contrasted?
second one is bear your own burden, right?
Burden and load.
That's not what it says.
Burdens and loads.
The
carry
first one is burden. Carry one another's burden. But then verse 5 says,
Each one has to carry their own load.
carry your own load. Now, what is the difference between a burden and a load?
Whose moral responsibility.
Yes, a load is a normal responsibility. Providing for my daily food, that's a load. Paying the mortgage, paying the rent, that's a load. Making the car payments, the medical payments, whatever bills I have, that's a load. Do we all have that?
Sure,
Absolutely. What are we supposed to do with it?
take care of it.
Carry it.
Yourself.
Do it yourself. What then is a burden?
Your house burnt down.
Your house burned down and the insurance company refuses to pay. Is that a normal thing?
Yeah.
Now you've got a burden.
Someone
A husband of a young family dies and the wife was staying at home as a stay-home mom, was raising the kids. Husband dies unexpectedly. His $150,000 a year job, poof, gone up in smoke. What's that? That's a burden,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Mhm.
So we are to carry burdens. But everybody has to carry their own load. Again, what have we said in our society?
We carry the loads and the burden.
Oh, it doesn't matter. Just integrate them. We'll come up with welfare and food stamps. Is that for a person who has a crisis in their life, or is that the ongoing way that the person will live? Right?
It's
Right.
reinforcing the dependency.
When somebody comes and asks for welfare, do they say, wow, what tragedy befell you that brought you to this point? No. Do they say, how can we get you out of this tragedy so you can begin to carry your own load again? No. The entire thing is keep it. Keep it going forever and ever and ever and ever. And once people get on welfare, guess what happens?
They don't
Stay
get
on it
off.
forever.
They almost never get off of it.
Dependent.
But the Bible says you have to carry your own load. Do all of us have a load? Is some people's loads heavier than other people's?
Of course.
Oh, yeah. But God gave you the load that you have and you need to carry it. Now, some people are not wise with that, and what do?
They add to it.
Squander.
Yeah, they add to their load. They take out useless debt. They run up massive credit card things to buy junk that they don't need. They don't save for a rainy day.
They can't even remember what they bought.
Yeah. I'm going nuts because my credit card just went, oh, because I just had to put brakes on my car, and then I turned around and mom's pendant came due, and do you know what they want for those things now?
$1,000.
They want about $450 a year.
What's that? I've fallen and I can't get up.
Yeah,
Medical pay.
Wow. How good are the batteries on those things? Like, does it last?
5 years,
Oh, okay. At least that's good.
and they just give you a new one whenever it's. But it's $300. It was $300 plus $30 plus $10 a month. When I first got it, it was $200. So it's doubled in price in 5 years, 6 years.
Let's go for it.
So,
What a candy bar, it's almost $3.
yeah,
Yeah.
How about a bottle of water is like $3?
yes.
We go to the movies, I gotta take a loan out.
Yeah, I remember them.
I got all.
Full size.
I got all upset when they went to six cents. That
That was, oh
You're
yeah.
cheap anyway, Mike.
Mhm.
I remember when the 8-ounce glass Pepsis and Cokes
Yeah.
were a nickel for 8 ounces.
And you are old.
And then they went, look who's talking. And then they went to the 12-ounce cans, and the 12-ounce cans were
They're 15 cents.
a dime at first. But that meant you only got 12 ounces for a dime, when with you were getting 16, 2 of the things for a dime. They had just jacked you for 12 or 4 ounces of. For
You
the,
used to get a deposit on, you got money back. when
Yeah.
you bottled it.
yeah,
I remember I used to run 5 blocks. My mother used to give me $1 to go get a large pizza.
Ah,
I used to run 5 blocks and have to run all the way home before it got cold.
That won't even pay for the cheese now.
that won't even pay for the box that it goes in.
So they charge you 5 cents? How much was it?
For a 8-ounce Coke.
So what, they made like 2 cents on the bottle?
Well, no. If the bottle was a returnable bottle,
Yeah,
that was
you get
2
money.
cents on
Yeah.
top of that, but you get the 2 cents back.
No, I meant for them to make money off what? Because you know they have the, wow.
Everything was low. I used to, those big bottles of soda, I used to pay $0.25 for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Well, what was it? right before COVID-19, that's 5 years ago, every single day you could get a 2 liter, because I know, for 99 cents. There was, or $1, one of the two. Every day of the week. And now it's $3 and on sale for $2. Oh,
But inflation's only up 15%.
yeah. Everything's double, but it's up 20%.
Bidenomics is working.
Yeah.
Who said it? Yep.
Uh,
Such a joke.
So again, these are these principles that why does God do this? Why does God say that if anyone won't work, they shouldn't eat? Why does God say a man has to support his own household? Why does God say you need to carry your own load?
Made us self-sufficient?
Because he know we'd be lazy.
Because there's a spiritual benefit in work. There is a spiritual benefit in work. It's not because God hates us. When was there no work?
There never was. Adam had a job. He had to go
Garden
name all the atoms.
When was there no work?
Work.
There never was.
Was
On
there?
the Sabbath day.
Oh,
Yeah.
No,
because there wasn't a
In the
Sabbath in the
garden.
Garden of Eden.
But you said there was work.
there was a responsibility. There was a job, but it was not work.
What's the difference?
It's not toil.
It was not toil. It was not something that was hard. There was no sweat involved.
Okay, well, you get the credit.
It was
for your work.
easy.
Oh, we're getting into semantics.
Well, it says
But-
it. It says it.
No, we're not.
Scripture.
Because when sin came into the world, what did that require?
Sweat of the
Sweat of your
brow.
brow.
By the
Sweat
sweat
of the
of your brow, you will
Yep.
now eat.
And then there was,
Now you're going to have to work.
there was never no weeds either.
Worth
Right. And sinful people need to work. They need to have something that is hard to do, something that isn't just frivolous.
Is that because I hands in the devil's workshop?
And so therefore, we've said, oh, the only attacks on the Bible are Jesus didn't rise from the dead. No, these subtle attacks of Satan, what they do is they undermine the human spirit and make them open for the lies of the devil. Because if you take work away from people and you just give them stuff for nothing, well, if you read on in 2 Thessalonians 3, verse 11, what does verse 11 say?
We hear that some among you are idle. They are not busy, they are busybodies.
What happens when you don't have work?
You get in other people's business.
You get into other people's business, you get into
Yeah.
things that you shouldn't get into, it becomes a negative spiritual situation. So it's not just about physical. There's a spiritual dimension to this. I can remember Bill McCartney at Promise Keepers back when Promise Keepers was something good. And he would say, kids come to me all the time, teenagers come to me say, how can I live for Jesus? And one of the things he used to say, Josh McDowell said the same thing. One of the greatest attacks on Christianity among teenagers is what?
Working.
You're eating all this fast food and staying up late playing video games, which were just getting started then. You're not getting enough sleep. You're not thinking clearly. If you're not eating the right foods, you're not healthy and feeling properly.
Bless you.
And that opens you up to things like depression and anxiety and hyperactivity, all of which destroy your spiritual life. We'd say no, they just need to read their Bible more. He would say, no, they need to go to bed at night at a decent hour. Need to eat good food. As they grow into adulthood and even at that age, you need to have responsibilities that you have to work at. If you don't have these things, you can't build on them the spiritual life that Christ requires. And if you want to tear down a wall, what's the best way to do it?
Bulldozer.
One block at a time.
Yeah.
Attack the foundation. If you
Bulldozers, I
attack
guess.
the parapets, if you attack the parapets, you might damage the parapets, but the rest of the wall remains secure. But if you destroy the foundation, what happens?
Well,
The whole thing comes down, including the top. While we've been busy trying to defend the parapets of Christianity, the person of Christ, the inspiration of the Bible, things like that, Satan has been undermining the foundation. Because if you can get people where they're not working, where they're laying around idle, you've got people that are rife to follow any philosophy because they have no purpose in life. They have no ambition, no drive, no desire for something better. So they just get filled with every kind of lust. And that's where, as believers, we have to come back and go, wait a minute. It's not just enough to fight for the stuff up here. We've got to fight for the foundation. New Tribes Missions did a great thing years ago. Mission groups, New Tribes Missions went into places where no one had ever gone before. They weren't going to cities where, people knew the name of, they're going to people who didn't know the name of Jesus in any way. And they would go in for years, starting back in the 30s and 40s, and they'd start preaching about Jesus died for you. And guess what? They get a lot of people to make professions of faith, but they weren't having great success in founding strong churches. And one of the New Tribes missionaries said, we're preaching the wrong message. God didn't start at John 1:1. Where did he start? Genesis 1:1.
In the beginning.
They both start within the beginning. But he didn't start with John 1:1. He started with Genesis 1:1. And what is Genesis 1 about?
Creation.
foundation.
It's not about the creation as much as it's about the creator. God made it all. Now, what's the principle if God made it all?
It all belongs to him.
It all belongs to him. So therefore, the end of Genesis 1, what do we see God do? And Genesis 2 and Genesis 3 especially, what do we see God do?
Make the rules.
God makes the rules. Eat this, don't eat this. And in Genesis 3, what do we see God do? He judges people for breaking his rules. So in the first 3 chapters of the Bible, what we learn about God is he was the creator and therefore is the owner. He is the lawmaker, the rule maker. He has the right as the owner to set the rules. And number 3,
He can enforce it.
he will enforce it by judging people who break his rules. You start at the cross without those 3 principles, and you don't get true conversions because people aren't worshiping the true God of the Bible. So what the people at New Tribes came up with was a year-long program to bring people up to the place where you could preach about Jesus. They took a whole year going through the Old Testament, teaching people about what God revealed about himself from Genesis to Malachi, so that people were prepared for, oh, what will we do? We're sinners. And then you can come along with, wait, God sent his son.
You know, there was a guy from my church's family, and they went to a tribe in Papua New Guinea called the Basodios. And they never even saw a white man before. And
Yep.
They went there and they did exactly what you said for 1 year. They put on a play every day, and the Basodio people came out. They did it 6 a.m. because it was so hot there.
Yeah.
You know, where they would do the play for like an hour, hour and a half. They would just act out the Bible, and the people couldn't wait to when Jesus, because they knew, just from seeing the play, they knew that there needed to be a savior. So like you said, they were ready for it.
It's the same thing the Greatest Journey does.
Yep.
Yeah.
Everybody's adopted that pattern now from that. But again, we were worrying about the parapets up here while Satan was undermining the foundation down here.
Hey, Tom.
And, yeah.
When we went to Sight and Sound and saw Moses, and then the 10 Commandments were given, and the people are looking at each other. What are we going to do? We can't keep all these laws. They're looking at each other and they're like, oh. And then at the end, Jesus walks down on stage and walks among them. And that just, it just touched my heart, because they're looking at each other like, we can't keep these 10 commandments. What are we going to do? God gave us these 10 commandments. And they're like looking at each other like, what are we going to do? And then here comes Jesus. He walks among them. And boy, that really was an impactful moment.
That makes sense.
Yep.
Yes.
And do you see how one of the satanic principles that he did is never discuss religion and politics? But they are two of the things that most concern the issues of life. Because obviously religion is about heaven and hell. Politics at its purest is about how we recognize the kingdom of God in this life. And Jesus said that's our responsibility. That's what we should be aiming for, because he said, when you pray, you need to pray.
Will be done.
Yeah. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. And at its purest form, politics is about how do we bring about God's will being practiced on earth.
Yeah, it's like who picking your king back in.
Yeah. And when politics is done wrong, what do we end up getting?
What we have now.
Tyranny,
Democrats.
oppression, satanic rule in every way, hatred, violence, death.
What you just said over the last couple of minutes, is that on tape still? Would that be?
We're still recording.
Great. Yeah, I wanted to write that down and I lost it, so
God bless.
All right.
Yep.
Goodness.
See you all.
Good night,
Good
everybody.
night.
Take care, everybody.
Good night, all.
Have a
Sleep
good
well.
night.
Good night, Louise.
Night. See